now. And Chrissy, you can go ahead.
All right, thank you. It's so great to be here. I am actually not going to leave my video on the whole time just to get a better feed because I'm going to be sharing some multiple screens. And we already had tech issues where I got kicked off this morning in our warm up. So hopefully I don't get kicked off again and everything goes smoothly. But just to let you all know before we dive into this important topic, the PowerPoint slide will be available with links to all of the resources. I'll also put things in the chat. And if you go to the chat right now, there's 3 little dots on the right-hand side that allow you to save the chat. So at the end of the webinar, if you save the chat, all the different links that I put in there, or other comments that go on, you'll be able to save all that from today's meeting. So we're going to dive right in because I have a lot of great things to share with you. So just to overview of what we're going to talk about today, as Rachel mentioned, I do work with student support coordinators across the state in helping them help adult learners with all of the different barrier reduction and goal setting and transitioning. And I also do national level work with links, if any of you are familiar with that, in career pathways. And so we definitely want to look today at some goal setting techniques that are effective and do work with adult learners, and then some different resources that tutors can use, and not just on the career side of goals, but what does this person have in their personal life that they're trying to achieve? What specific academic goals do they want to do? And then what do they want to do in career that aligns to the academic and personal? We're going to talk about how to help adults take ownership too. So we definitely want this to be student-centered as much as possible. And finally, we'll look at ways to track progress and overcome challenges, because even if we use these great research-based techniques and, worked with the student, there's always going to be some challenges in working with adult learners. So we'll talk about some strategies to overcome some common challenges we might see. So what I'd like to do to start off is get us warmed up. If you feel comfortable unmuting, you can do that, or you can just type in the chat. And I want everybody just take a few seconds before you respond. So we're going to have some quiet time here and a little awkward silence, but think about something you've maybe imagined doing, but you've never done it before. And then, how could you or did you in the past convince yourself to do something you've never done before? And then if you still haven't convinced yourself to do it, why not? What's stopping you? And that's just totally in life in general. So not necessarily like something you haven't done with tutoring, but just in life in general, something you haven't done, but you've thought about doing. Again, you can unmute and share or type it in the chat.
Hey, Chrissy, I'll jump in.
Thank you, Fred. Go ahead.
Freddie. Something that I hadn't done before, I would say setting a goal and writing it down and kind of holding yourself to it, I think can be effective. And as far as something I didn't do, might be fear of failure or fear of embarrassment. Mm-hmm. So those are mine.
Thank you. Yeah, and just sometimes like it's the fear of what other people will think, like you said, that embarrassment piece. What are others going to say, or how are they going to respond? And then Beth put in that she was motivated by the real desire to change. So she really had a heavy desire to change. You're looking to see if anyone else wants to unmute or type in the chat. Yeah, so I'll say I just came back from a long weekend in Tennessee at Gatlinburg, and they have zip lining, and I think that that's really cool, but I really don't like heights. So the fear of heights has really stopped me from doing zip lining. I know lots of other people have done it, they've survived. And I think that's another piece of it. Like anything you're thinking about doing, like, do you know somebody that's done it? How did they do it? How were they successful? What, fears did they have, or how did they get themselves motivated? How did they overcome it? So I think even when we're working with adult learners, they want to hear or talk to other people that have done something that they're thinking about doing, and like, how did that work out? So being able to talk to somebody that has similar experiences. And Rachel said she was, not too sure about driving, and eventually, work through that. And that's a good point. There's a lot of people I've met that didn't get their license until later in life. And, again, that fear or the delay in doing it creates other barriers, not having that freedom to drive. But, again, we have to think about like our learners, like they want to do one thing and they sort of overcome one fear or barrier, but then there still might be other smaller barriers and things they have to overcome. So it might not just be overcoming one thing. It's like multiple things they have to overcome to get to where they want to be. So thank you for everyone that shared. I'm going to share a video right now. We're just going to watch 3 minutes of the video. And if you've heard of Carol Dweck, if you maybe want to put a thumbs up if you know how to do that on Zoom, or just want to type in the chat that you've heard of her. But just to give a real quick background on Carol Dweck, she's the psychologist that sort of did the research and put out a lot of information on the growth mindset. So if you've heard of growth mindset versus fixed mindset, Carol Dweck is the person that started that. And so she's going to talk for a few minutes about the power of yet. I think this, again, is a great video. Even if you showed this 3 minutes that we're going to watch to a learner, it would be great to get a conversation going. Or, just even you're watching it and thinking about how you might have that same type of conversation with a learner. So I'm going to switch over to the video here. Just bear with me for 1 second.
The power of yet. I heard about a high school in Chicago where students had to pass a certain number of courses to graduate, and if they didn't pass a course, they got the grade not yet. And I thought that was fantastic, because if you get a failing grade, you think, I'm nothing, I'm nowhere. But if you get the grade not yet, you understand that you're on a learning curve. It gives you a path into the future. Not yet also gave me insight into a critical event early in my career, a real turning point. I wanted to see how children coped with challenge and difficulty. So I gave 10-year-olds problems that were slightly too hard for them. Some of them reacted in a shockingly positive way. They said things like, I love a challenge, or, I was hoping this would be informative. They understood that their abilities could be developed. They had what I call a growth mindset. But other students felt it was tragic, catastrophic. From their more fixed mindset perspective, their intelligence had been up for judgment, and they failed. Instead of luxuriating in the power of yet, they were gripped in the tyranny of now. So what do they do next? I'll tell you what they do next. In one study, they told us they would probably cheat the next time instead of studying more if they failed a test. In another study, after a failure, they looked for someone who did worse than they did so they could feel really good about themselves. And in study after study, they have run from difficulty. Scientists measured the electrical activity from the brain as students confronted an error. On the left, you see the fixed mindset students. There's hardly any activity. They run from the error. They don't engage with it. But on the right, you have the students with the growth mindset, the idea that abilities can be developed. They engage deeply. Their brain is on fire with yet. They engage deeply.
Okay, so any thoughts or comments on what she was sharing? She made the statement of how there was the power of yet or the tyranny of now, and looking at the students' brains and how they approach a problem and deal with a problem. So any comments or thoughts on what you tend to see with your adult learners? Do they typically want to run into the problem and engage with it? Are they the ones that would feel like the power of yet, or do you see more times the learners you're working with might be a little bit more of the fixed mindset and running away from the challenge?
I'll help you out. This is Lynn. What I see is the students are close to reaching their goal. They're the ones that jump in and dive and are willing to try other things. And the students who have a longer way to go, or they don't have the confidence yet, they're the ones that pull back and they don't have that ability yet to jump in and do the hard thing without lots of support.
Thank you, Lynn. So let's talk about some goal setting techniques. So keeping in mind that our adult learners are all going to be different. Some are, like Lynn mentioned, they might be ready and have some confidence and self-motivation, and they really embrace things, and others have many fears and lots of different barriers and things coming into play. So where do you start with helping them? So one of the really effective ways of working with adult learners in goal setting is asking a lot of open-ended questions. So open-ended, they can't answer with just a yes or no. So saying things like, where do you see yourself in 6 weeks, 6 months, 1 year? And I'll say for most adult learners, that's really a hard question. They don't know. So, although they can't say yes or no, they might just shrug it. I don't know. But if they came into the program and at least gave a sense of like one thing that they want to do, so obviously you're paired up with them, they want to do something academically. So if they say, they want to read better, why is, reading better important to you? And sometimes we hear people say, I want to be able to read to my child. I want to be able to better understand the things they're doing in school, or I want to be able to get that promotion at a job. And I know I need to improve my reading skills to do that. And the third one's really powerful. Like if you imagine, like, how would your life be different if you did blank? What skills and supports do you currently have? And that's also very important for students to think about, what do they have that can support? So if they don't have anything, or they only have, a little bit of support, how can they build up and have the support they need? Because we need support when we're trying to achieve a goal. And then what concerns do they have? What are their fears? What are their concerns? What do they anticipate their barriers might be? So when you ask these open-ended questions of learners, one of the things you want to do is listen for change talk. So what does the student say that triggers you to believe they're willing to do something that they aren't doing right now? And then listening for barriers. What could get in the way of the student meeting their goal? Some students can identify their own barriers. Other students, different things they say will help you understand what their barriers might be, and then you may be able to sort of say, do you think that you're going to be able to deal with X? Or if Y happened, do you think you would have the support to overcome that? And then finally, it's so important to help learners build on their strengths. And again, if they have low self-confidence, low self-efficacy, they may struggle to build on their strengths. So let's look at SMART goal setting. When we're doing SMART goal setting, we're asking, is the goal specific? Is the goal measurable? Can the student achieve the goal with support? Is the goal realistic right now? And how much time will the goal take to achieve? So if everyone could just take a moment in the chat box, have you done SMART goal setting before? And if so, which of these specific, measurable, achievable, realistic time seem to be the most difficult for learners to cover when they're SMART goal setting? And if you don't like typing in the chat, you can unmute as well. Thank you, Beth, for being so honest. I know sometimes I've worked with learners and they ask me like, well, how long do you think it's going to take for me to pass all these sections of the GED test? And even if I've been working with them for months, it's hard to say. I mean, there's a lot of different factors that play into it. And many times they want to hear like, oh, it'll take 2 weeks and you'll be done. And that's not the case. All right, Fred, thanks for sharing that, you know, doing that kind of goal setting with other people, that you have that experience, and hopefully you can transfer those skills over to working through that with the learners.
I'd like
yeah,
to
go
add
ahead.
something. This is Steve. I began tutoring last May. I'm just tutoring one student right now. And I had done all the preparation, gone through all the modules before I started tutoring, and I learned about SMART goal setting. So when Claire and I first met, which was online, all of our meetings have been online except for 2. I did the SMART goal setting with her, and I thought it was very effective, and really got her to think about things and what we were trying to achieve. However, we have not revisited it since then, and now it's 9 months later, and this is reminding me that maybe she and I need to go back and look at this again. And I guess I'm wondering, like, how often should we be revisiting the goals that were set, and, you know, whether we're achieving them?
Well, you're one step ahead of me because we're going to talk about that in about 2 seconds. So yeah, great point. And, you know, it really does help them break down and see all the pieces of it, set up the action steps, and then, you know, you can't just do it once and not look at it again. So we'll talk a little bit about some techniques to use with it once you set the goal. I'll share some other documents in a little bit too. Most of your agencies probably have a SMART goal setting form of some sort that they're using. But if they don't, there is one that I'll share. So I think your question, Christine, probably should be, I mean, many students need lots of supports. They, you know, probably can't just do it with one type of support, but, you know, if you go and look at some of the research, especially working with individuals in poverty, support systems are many different things. So like support might be a person, support might be a physical, meeting a physical need. So food and shelter and things like that might be a support. Mentoring might be a support, and having the ability to work with other people that have similar lived experiences, and then also work with people who have expertise in certain things. So all those pieces can come into play, I think. So
Hey, Christine,
go ahead,
how
Fred.
would you use that? Because I think that whole SMART technique is very effective. But how would you use it if somebody is just trying to learn how to do basic reading?
Well, it still goes back to, if you go back here, like if they say, why is reading important to you, right? So they're specifically telling you why reading's important to you. And so measurable piece is like, so if they say to you, well, I want to read to get that promotion. Well, like, how long is this promotion going to be open? Like, are they holding it for you? Or like a lot of people are applying it for right now. So if your goal is to improve your reading to get that promotion, is this going to be realistic? And do you have the time, is that going to work? Whereas if someone said to you that they wanted to be a better reader so they can read to their child and better understand what they're doing in school, they might have a little bit more time. And like if they're at a first grade reading level, that might be a little more realistic that they could move up enough to read like some books to their children and keep improving over time. And again, helping them say, okay, well, let's try to be able to read this book within the next 3 weeks and practice it with your child. Again, going back to someone that's looking for that promotion. If they said, well, we know this promotion, like somebody's retiring and they're going to retire in 6 months, and I would then be able to apply for it. And this is what I would need to be able to do. And then it could be specific about what they're trying to read. So does that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
So when we're looking at career goals, like we mentioned earlier, there's some personal goals they're going to have, academic goals, and if they're trying to improve their skills to do something different with their career or to actually enter the workforce and start on a career path, it's important that they do some career awareness, that they know what types of occupations are in their local area, what they pay, what the hours are like, what the working conditions are like, what education and training is required. So what's around me? And then the next piece of that is career exploration, where like, what does it take to do this? And how many, openings are there? I mean, can I go out and talk to somebody that's doing this type of job and actually go on site and do a job shadow for one day? Can I do a mock interview to see what kind of questions they would ask? And then finally, taking a look at the skills, interests, and values, because we don't want to have students make a career goal and they get into something like, oh my gosh, this does not match up with my values. It's not going to be a good fit for me. So all of these things have to happen to feed into that career goal. So going back, one of you mentioned about like, setting goals early on. So some people are going to come in and just be focused on reading or math, or they might just be so tunnel vision on, I just got to pass the GED test. My dad's going to kick me out of my house if I don't pass the GED test and get my high school equivalency. And so sometimes you get started with that personal SMART goal, and then later you do some of these activities and you start moving that to like, okay, how's that goal going to relate to a career goal? Or if it doesn't, like maybe we're ready to set a second goal that's related to careers, and like, how do we pull pieces of what we've been talking about into that SMART goal setting? So you set the goal, and you get some action steps, but you have to realize and you have to explain this to learners, because they're not going to just figure this out on their own. Goal setting is fluid. You set it, but it's fluid. If and especially, we're talking about career goal. We want those manageable steps, and we want an actual plan. So we say, okay, this is my SMART goal. These are the steps I think I can take to get there. And, now I have a full-blown plan. This is what I'm going to try to do. But the only thing constant in the world is change, right? So, even if we have a plan, there might be things that happen in our lives that change our plan. So we want to model and help the student start self-monitoring at these different steps that they've created. And then at each step, as they're getting ready to go on to the next step, kind of still looking forward, do I need to maybe make some changes? And this still all going to work for me. And so if you revisit the goals on a regular basis, so I wouldn't say there's a hard set amount that you're supposed to do it, but like, depending on how often you're meeting with your learner, what's happening in their life. I mean, maybe it's once a week, maybe it's every other week, maybe it's once a month. I mean, it's really important that you get to know your learner first and foremost, and then start to get a sense of when they might need nudging, when they start to monitor themselves. So maybe you start out, looking at steps more frequently and then tapering off and spreading it out. Or if they seem really nervous and they get really discouraged easily, maybe you don't want to talk too much about the goal the first couple of weeks. Maybe you want to wait a month till you revisit and just really build that relationship with them, so that when you revisit the goal, you guys have a really strong relationship, that if you have to have a difficult conversation, that they're going to be open and honest with you. But you do need to realize that by allowing them to understand that the goal plan is fluid and there can be changes to it, and that you're going to, you tell them up front, hey, we're setting this goal and we're going to revisit it every so often, and we're going to see if you want to change pieces to it. You're helping them make decisions. And then again, this goes back to making them feel more empowered and being student-centered. And, when they're looking at some of those future steps, again, down the road, they're using the problem-solving skills, like, did new barriers come up, or did new support systems arise? And like, maybe what I thought was going to be more difficult, it's not going to be as bad as it, originally planned for. And again, that goes to that growth mindset and getting them into the harnessing the power of not yet. But that doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't usually happen quickly. And there has to be a lot of little successes. And we'll talk a little bit about that later, like how to build up the learner through that. So any questions about this before we go on to some resources that you can use? All right, so I'm going to switch screens over to the internet, and then what I'll do is put all of the links at once in the chat after I've talked about these different resources, so that if you want to download the chat, you'll have all the links. And like I mentioned before, you'll also have the links in the PowerPoint. So if you want to download the PowerPoint from the portal, or ask somebody at your agency to get you a copy of it. So the Integrating Career Awareness curriculum has a lot of great modifiable handouts that you can use. And so you can go on to this website and download them into Microsoft Word. And I've been able to copy and paste them into Google Drive too. So if you have, doing some things at a distance and you have learners able to access Google Drive, you might be able to do it that way. So the first one is, make this larger. This is the SMART goal worksheet that I was talking about. Again, most of your agencies probably have one. This definitely, if you had a lower level learner, you might have to have the conversation and fill some of this out. And this might even be a little overwhelming if they're a lower level or an English language learner. So again, you sort of have to figure out if this is the right form, but whether you use this form or not, the process should still be the same. So, making sure you're talking with the student about why the goal is important, how it's going to benefit them if they achieve this goal. The next one that I wanted to share is job values. So remember, I talked about, especially with career goals, everybody's reasons for wanting to go into a certain occupation different. I mean, there's the interest piece of it, but our job values even change over time. So when I talk with learners about the job values, I mentioned, like, when I first got out of college, I, was all about having like a good job and a good salary and trying to pay off my school loans. And then I started having children, and then my job values switched a little bit. I wanted more flexibility. And then eventually my kids left home, and then I wanted an opportunity to learn and develop skills. And I was able to work somewhere that, allowed me to be able to further my education. And so, there's lots of different factors, and there's no right or wrong answer. And then this, just helps them kind of use their top values when they're evaluating different jobs and occupations. And then this one is things I'm good at. And so again, the curriculum has different lists and things, but this is like the final one where they can kind of just say, these are things that I've made and skills I use to do that. So this is really good for people that are trying to get into the workforce and never have had a job, and just trying to show them that there's things they've done in their real life that can equate to skills they can use in the workforce. And again, this is building up that self-esteem and like, yes, you came here because you can't read well, but there's lots of things you can do well and you have done. And let's, make sure we look at some of the strengths that you have and how those strengths might help you overcome some of the new things that you're trying. And then finally, things I like, this was created quite some time ago, so I don't know that many of our learners are reading the newspaper, but you might change, again, this is in Word, so you can change it. Maybe you change that question to like, what's your favorite website to go to, or favorite thing to do when you're on the internet. And so there's different questions there, and you could change up some of those or just use a few of them. And again, this is something where you can use early on to really get to know your learner and see when they talk about certain things, when they light up versus when they talk about other things, do they sort of seem a little, discouraged about discussing it. And that gives you some clues into ways that you can motivate them later. So the other thing that I'll share is we have, if you're not familiar, Wakelet is like an online bulletin board. So it's just a place to collect resources. You do not need a Wakelet account to access the Wakelet board. So again, when I share this link, you will be able to see all of these resources. If you wanted to create your own Wakelet board and put together your own collection or virtual board, then you would need to create a Wakelet account to do that. So you'll see some of the ICA, the Integrating Career Awareness worksheets are here. And then there's some other examples of documents and things that people have used across the state. So one of the things that's listed here is my career plan. So again, I was working with a learner and we were using Google and, working on technology skills in addition to reading and writing. And so I took some things from the ICA and put them into independent slides. And so we started by doing a couple of these slides together, and then we'd wait a few weeks and then we'd come back to do more. And so this is how we sort of spread out some of the SMART goal setting and revisiting. And as we did some of these activities, we would say, okay, do we need to go back and change any of our steps for our plan, or has our goal maybe changed, or we added a new one? So you can see we did some career exploration in here. We have our SMART goal. And when you get the link to this, if you want to copy it, you can copy it. So you can save it into your own Google Drive and then use it with a learner, if you feel comfortable with that. I mean, again, if you and your learner aren't comfortable with Google Slides, you could take some of this and just put it in a Word document on a piece of paper, whatever works for you and your learner. The other Wakelet board that I have is, again, some things that other people have created across the state and are willing to share. So here someone made a Wakelet board for their learners and sharing that with them. And then you can make individual like Wakelets with your students if they wanted to put their goal plan into Wakelet. They can do that as well. So lots of different options here. The other thing, I'm not going to play these videos in full, but I do just want to highlight again when we're working with the learners and we want to get them, seeing like that they maybe can do this. There's some great GED graduate stories. So if you are working with anyone who's working on taking the GED test and getting their high school equivalency, you might want to look through some of these different stories and say, okay, which one maybe seems like my student, that if they watch this, they might be like, oh, this person did that, maybe I can too. So I'll just play a little bit of this real quick, but you'll see that they're like real people and they have the closed captioning and it's on YouTube. So it's pretty easy to access even if your learner only uses a smartphone.
I am 28 years old and I am from Glen Burnie. I ended up going into 12th grade. And then at that time, I got pregnant at 16, ended up having my son at 17. And so we ended up moving into Lanham, and they basically were like, oh, you can't be in school anymore here in Anne Arundel because of the distance. So I was trying to find a high school in Lanham, and they were closed with their daycare. So my mom and dad was like, well, this is your child, so you have to figure it out. So I ended up.
So that one just gives you an example too, like even if you watch that with the learner, had them watch it, like you could even practice problem solving and decision making, like what were her problems, what were the cause of the problems, what were the effect, what's were some options that she had, how did she go about it, what supports did she have, you know, how long did it take? So, you know, those are again helping you do some like active conversation with the learners and getting them to talk more about their goal and how they might be able to overcome some barriers. Here's an example of a local agency, Literacy Pittsburgh. They had some learners who have been successful and they shared messages with new students. So again, maybe talking with your agency if that's something you could do, that students who have been successful can share their stories. So we'll just share a little snippet of hers.
It's something that I put off for a long time because I thought I don't have the time, I don't have the money, I don't have, you know, like all this. But honestly, whatever was going on, I felt like it was made very, very simple for me, fit my schedule. It was just like, I felt really like this is everybody's goal is for me to get this GED. You know, this isn't just me, like everybody really cares. So, and you know, it's not just about the GED, it's like, how are you doing? You know, how are you at home? Like, do you need anything? What can we help with? I've never experienced something like that.
So again, something to, you know, think about if you have learners in your program that are getting near to finishing their goal, can they, you know, if you're meeting with someone virtually, you know, could you share a video of a current student in that agency? Could you connect with another student and tutor? And, you know, so just, you know, we have all this technology now and just thinking about different ways that we can help learners connect with other people that have been through similar experiences and been successful. The other thing is vision boards. So again, you can kind of use Wakelet to, you know, help somebody create a vision board, or you can use a poster board, or you can use like a Word document. But usually what a vision board does is like you set the goal, but then they add things to this vision board that are going to keep them focused on their goal and help them make progress. So it might be words or quotes. So you can see some examples there. You could cut them out of magazines, print them off the internet, have different pictures, and then it could be like a blank notebook that becomes their vision board, and they add different things that way. So some great ideas in there for things you could do. And again, a lot of these things might help them with, while they're doing it, they're practicing some reading skills, some writing skills, doing some exploration. And then if you are really into wanting to progress yourself as a tutor with goal setting, this is like the next step up. So everything I've shared prior to this is like take and go. You can go onto my Wakelet and grab materials. You could copy the Google Slides and use it tomorrow if you wanted to. Today, even this afternoon, you could show one of those videos and have a conversation with goals. This is more like, I really want to dig more into goal setting and really think about it some more and look at some things in more depth before I kind of do more stuff with my students with goal setting. So this is a toolkit, and it's a little bit longer. It still talks about SMART goal setting, but you know, this is if you really like to dig into things deeper, wanted to give that option as well. Any questions or any of the resources that you want me to go back to on the screen that I can answer or clarify anything? Okay, give everybody a second yet. If there's anything you need to put in the chat, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint.
I just want to remind everyone that you'll have access to the PowerPoint in the portal. And Chrissy, you were going to put all the links in the chat as well, right?
Yeah, so let me do that right now. So I'm putting the links in the order that I shared things today. So it should all come through. You might have to, it might be easy, like it'll download it as a little note or something, but you might want to copy them all in a Word document, spread them out, or like I said, pick your favorite ones, maybe create your own little Wakelet board with them, or save them in a Word document for yourself. Those, Rachel, those came through okay, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And if you want to save it down in the chat, in the box where you would type a message, there are 3 dots on the right-hand side. And one of the options there is to save the chat. Just so you don't have to like try and copy paste that entire list.
So, you know, again, we want things to be student led. I know in that one video, she was saying, it was like, everybody wanted me to do this. So she felt supported, but at the end of the day, she needed to want to do it. It didn't matter if 5 other people wanted her to do it. She needed to want to do it. So, you know, by allowing the student to actually create the plan and put it in their own words, and they have the original plan, and maybe you only have a copy, and that they're self-monitoring and sharing updates, and they're identifying what support and guidance, that's all very important. So they don't feel like somebody's just telling them what to do. So as a tutor, you know, be aware of the plan, work with the student, decide how often you guys will review the plan and talk about that together. When you want to share ideas or suggestions, ask permission, because that makes them feel more empowered. So say things like, you know, I noticed that you identified this as a barrier, and I'm just wondering if you would like me to share some ways that other learners have overcome that barrier. So for example, if someone says, no, I'm not really sure how childcare is going to work, instead of you just giving them 5 ideas of how to fix the childcare issue, you would say, well, would you like me to share some ways other people have dealt with that same problem? And that just makes the wording just makes it more empowering to the student. They'll always know like what supports they have and what strengths they have, and you know, again, emphasizing and helping them match up when they already have certain strengths they could use to align to their plan, and when they might have supports that they need and how to connect to them. And really, again, going back to getting to know them and know what motivates them. So just take a moment if people want to put things in the chat or unmute. Does anyone have any other suggestions on ways they help adults take ownership of their goals? Are there any other ways or tools you have seen adults use to sort of nudge themselves through? What other supports might you be aware of that are available? So we want to just make sure if there's some things that are going on in other parts of the state, that we have this opportunity to share any other ideas of things. So I'll say like the middle one for me, I've helped some adult learners put little reminders and things in their smartphones. So even like simple smartphones have ways to put reminders and alarms. And so that's one like tool that gives them some way to do it themselves and nudge them to how often they need to check in and do something. So we're winding down here, and we're going to talk a little bit now about how we track the progress that's being made. So remember that any movement forward is progress, even if it's slow. And, you know, part of being able to track progress and have a goal is like you have to know where you're going, because if you don't know where you're going, you're not going to know when you get there. So, you know, we set this goal, but we have to have this vision of like, what's this going to look like? How's my life going to change? How am I going to know that it's made a difference? So, you know, in one sense, again, if someone's working on passing the GED test to get a high school equivalency, they're going to maybe have a physical diploma and know that they got there, that they did that. But what other things came out of that are better, their life is better because of that? And how are they going to see that all those other benefits, not just the piece of paper? Yeah, so that's a good point. When learners talk about what they're not happy about, that can give you a lot of clues, especially like when you might start to like lose them or they get like discouraged and things. So you definitely, want to have that relationship that you guys can have open conversation about anything that would help you help them. All right, so tips for tracking progress. Definitely we want to make these goals reasonable and have clear time expectations from the start. So again, it's fluid, it can change, but don't start with it being like wishy-washy and not real clear, because then it'll just constantly change and be hard to ever get anything accomplished. Figure out what tools work for your students. Do they like to have a paper journal? Do they like to use apps on their phone? Do they need to make themselves like a little whiteboard or bulletin board in their home? And make checkpoints part of the overall goal plan. So again, have the conversation. How often do you think we should check in? And that can be fluid. Maybe at the beginning, you guys say, oh, every week we're going to check in. And maybe say every month, every 3 weeks, whatever. I wouldn't say check in, like don't check in for a year, because we want those checkpoints to be spread out a little better. Set up some rewards in advance, and those can be internal and external. So again, if you have a learner that really struggles with self-confidence and self-efficacy and building themselves up, maybe make that a part of their plan, is that, hey, every week you're going to stop yourself and you're going to write down something you're proud of yourself for. And that's an internal reward. You're going to say, this is what I did that's good and it's going to help me meet my goal. And external might be something like, they like a certain coffee at Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks. Maybe if you hit this milestone, go treat yourself to this coffee or special treat. Always celebrate the small wins, the planned and unplanned ones. That's really important, so that, even something that seems really minor, all those little minor wins add up to big things later. And also help the students always anticipate that there's going to be challenges and how you can work through the different possible solutions. And maybe they try one possible solution and that doesn't work, they can come back to something else. So again, helping them build the problem solving and decision-making skills. So I want to ask everyone to think about for a moment, if you're building up this secret to achieving success, like if you're saying to learners, like, okay, here's where you want to go, here's how you might get there. We said that you've got to have the vision, like you have to know, what does the end look like? And, what if these things happen, I know I'm getting to, my goal. What's the plan? Like, what are the steps? Can I check things off? Can I reward myself when I hit these different milestones? And then, what else might need to be part of achieving success? So I'll give everybody a moment to put things in the chat or unmute. Like, what's the secret sauce here? So we've got these two things, but we need one more. And if we put that into this whole mix, we're likely going to see our learners achieving their goals. And there's not one right answer. There could be a few things that go in the secret sauce. Okay, good. Nobody's fallen asleep on me yet. I've got lots of things coming in through the chat. Keep them coming. Great. Motivation and encouragement, resources. Yep, showing and visualizing that success, even if it's small steps. Confidence, I mean, that was something Lynn talked about earlier, building up that self-confidence. Measuring and tracking results. Yep. So I think, yeah, that confirmation, because you guys have to realize, I mean, some of these learners, no one else in their household is going to recognize and help confirm what they're doing. And so they could get very discouraged when they're not with you. So that time that they're with you, it's so important, even the smallest of things, and reassurance, and like, for you to be able to see things that maybe they themselves don't, see. Yeah, so thank you everybody for sharing. Love all the stuff coming through the chat. So again, another thing to think about is motivation. And we talked about that might be a piece of the secret sauce. Like, if we start to see that learners are getting discouraged about something, like how can we motivate them? I mean, eventually we want them to figure out how to motivate themselves when they kind of get in a funk, but sometimes they need us to do that. So right here is what's called a Frere model. So you take like a word and you put it in the middle, and then you work around like definitions, synonyms, examples, and non-examples. And so this is really something you can even do with your adult learners and say, like, what does motivation mean to you? How would you stay motivated? Like when you don't want to do something, how are you going to do it? And what other words do you use for motivation? And like, how would I be able to see that you're motivated? What would I notice? Give me some examples. What are some things you might do that would tell me you're not motivated anymore? Something. And so again, it's opening up conversation. It's working on vocabulary. It can work on writing skills. So this is a great activity to do with your learners and keep them persisting. And then overcoming those challenges. Again, we've talked about how important problem-solving skills are in decision-making, but also, being able to self-manage. And so again, I go back to like how helping students maybe build in some of their own rewards is helping them build their self-management skills. And so any other skills that you can think of that you'd like to put in the chat that might help them be more prepared to overcome challenges and disruptions in their plan. Okay, I don't see anything in the chat right now, but if some come to mind, feel free to add those in the chat. So let's look at a scenario together. Let's say we have learner A. They want to improve their English speaking and reading skills to obtain a promotion at their job. Currently, they're working 50 hours a week, and they have been struggling to make it to tutoring sessions. They live in a household with 3 other supportive adult family members who are also non-native English speakers, and they do have access to a laptop and the internet. So their basic current goal that they've said right now is, I just want to speak better within 3 months. So how might we help make that a little bit of a better goal? What do you see as being some of the strengths that this learner has? What are some of the supports? What are some ways you might be able to help this learner with their goals and progressing? What are some things we've talked about today that you might want to use with this learner? So again, we're going to have some awkward silence, give everybody some time to marinate on this and think about it. And then you can unmute or put in the chat just some thoughts and comments for helping this type of learner. So again, unmuting or in the chat, what are some things we shared today that maybe you would use with this learner? Do you notice any strengths that this learner has? Do you notice any supports that they have? Do you notice something they need? Is there anything you could add to this goal to help it be more aligned with SMART goal setting?
Chrissy, one thing I would add is to speak English, say in the kitchen, like at the table, like pick a room, and every time they're there, everybody in the house has to speak English at that moment, to try to do that as opposed to just, like giving them a specific time and place seems to make it more attainable. And then the other thing is when they're watching TV, pick one show to listen to in English. And even if they have to have the closed caption in Spanish so they can follow along, or vice versa, sometimes helps.
Yeah, those are great tips, Lynn. And it looks like some other people were putting some similar comments in the chat. Like, rather than just say, try to speak more English at home, you're being very specific and you're making a plan, like you said, that one room or this time or this show. And like somebody else put like a certain movie, and other people, I hopefully you can all see the chat. I don't want to spend time reading everybody's things. And again, hopefully you're able to find the chat, save the chat so you can come back and see some of these different ideas that people have shared today. So thank you for those of you. Anyone else that wanted to unmute and make a comment?
Chrissy, I just started with the gentleman that I'm working with, kind of identifying specific words that he struggles with. And, I talked to Deb a couple of weeks ago about the idea of using flashcards. So we wrote down all these words that he struggles with, and I keep going over them with him. I mean, it's at least a start to try to get some indication of what kind of progress is he making. Some of these words are like one syllable that he just doesn't identify. So I figure that's a good gauge. It's specific and measurable, like if he could, let's say there's 20 words and he could get 5 without struggling today, and then in a month he can get 15. To me, that's progress. So,
And it sounds like it's student-centered too, because, the flashcards are what seem to work for him, and he's creating them and he's having the ownership of them, and he can make them his own and add new ones, takes them out, and is hands-on if that's, more their learning style. So I just, we're at the last 2 minutes of our time together, and I just wanted to give everybody an opportunity to give some feedback in the chat or unmute what was helpful or inspiring, something you might want to try, something which you might still need help and support with as a tutor related to goal setting. And I forgot to mention in the beginning, like one of the reasons I was so excited that Rachel and Lynn asked me to do this today is because I started in adult literacy as a volunteer tutor when I was in college, and later even went back to, it was part of a course, and then I still did it after the course and went back and did some more tutoring later on. And one of my first individuals had a stroke and lost his ability to read and write. And so we spent many months at those very low level repetitive activities. And so it's just inspiring to me that I've been, it's been like over 20 years since I first met a learner and, did that tutoring. And it's always nice to come back and see that there's still people in our communities that are dedicated to helping adult learners achieve their goals. So I just definitely want to thank all of you for the time and the, effort that you put into helping people progress in their skills and to really get to know them and help them build up and achieve their goals. So Beth said about Quizlet, you can do that for free. That's another way. And again, like looking at each learner is like maybe you use paper flashcards with one learner, but down the road you get a different learner and they really like technology and apps on their phone, and maybe Quizlet's better for them to do that. Someone said that they liked the power of yet and benefited from revisiting SMART goal setting. The Quizlet idea is popular. Any other things that people might try or things they're going to take away from today? So I'll just share my email address on the screen, but I'll put it in the chat as well. If you do have additional questions or thoughts, you can contact me. Beth asked about when the PowerPoint will be available. Rachel and Lynn, do you know how quickly it would go in the, I don't even know if it's actually in the portal already.
So the PDF of the PowerPoint usually goes into the portal pretty quickly. It can take a little bit longer to get the recording in. So maybe check in about, the end of this week or beginning of next week for that. We've also started posting these on YouTube. So there will be a YouTube link, and that also can take a little longer because they do closed captioning for those. But I would say next week that should be going up. If anybody has problems accessing the portal, or if you want a recording and you need help with that, feel free. I'm going to put my email address in here as well. sorry, I can't type and talk at the same time. And you can feel free to just email me, or if you're a volunteer, you can email your volunteer coordinator and they can help you. But yeah, it's great to see everybody. And I'll hope to see some of you back, if it's relevant to you. Next month is on making math accessible. So if you are working with math, or if you know someone else at your agency who's working with math, I think that would be a great topic. Chrissy, do you have anything else that you would like to add, or does anybody else have questions for Chrissy before we end?
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add. And, again, just about, I'm available whenever. So, if it's 6 months down the road and you have a new learner and you forgot some of what we talked about, if you can dig up my email or find me on LinkedIn or somewhere, just get in touch and I'll be happy to talk about it again.
All right, so I'm going to stop